There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being different. It begins early. Maybe you were the child who asked too many questions, who felt too deeply, who noticed what others didn't. The tone behind the words, the tension behind the smiles, the pain behind the silence. While others played, you were busy observing. While others moved on quickly, you carried things longer, emotions, moments, memories. And at some point you learned, not everyone sees the world like you do. At first you tried to explain, you tried to fit your difference into words others could understand, but their eyes glazed over, or they laughed, or they told you, kindly or not, that you were too much. So you began to edit yourself. You learned which parts of you to show, which thoughts to share, which feelings to silence. You became fluent in the art of filtering, in softening your edges to make others comfortable. You made yourself smaller, more digestible, more familiar. But deep down, you always knew you were never quite like the others. Carl Jung would have called this a sign, not of failure, but of individuation. He believed that each of us has a true self, buried beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and conformity. And the journey of life is to unearth that self, to become whole, not perfect, to become who you were before the world told you who to be. If you've ever felt like an outsider, like your mind works differently, like your presence confuses or unsettles others, that's not a defect, it's a direction. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. Your depth is not a burden. Your complexity is not a flaw. You were simply made for a different kind of life. A life that values soul over speed, meaning over noise, truth over comfort. But living this kind of life comes at a cost, because the world often misunderstands what it cannot categorize. And most people are more comfortable with what is familiar than what is true. So when you show up fully, when you speak honestly, feel openly, love deeply, you will be met with confusion, resistance, sometimes even rejection. Not because you are wrong, but because you are real. And realness, in a world addicted to masks, is disruptive. You might find yourself in rooms full of people and still feel unseen. You might pour your heart into connections that never go beyond the surface. You might begin to wonder, is there something wrong with me? But Jung would remind you, the more you become yourself, the fewer people will mirror you until you find your true tribe. And finding them requires patience. It requires discernment. It requires the willingness to be alone rather than inauthentic. You were not made to fit in. You were made to awaken. And awakenings are rarely comfortable. They strip away illusion. They break false attachments. They burn down the masks you wore for safety. They leave you raw, exposed, and real. But in that rawness, something beautiful emerges. Clarity. You begin to see who you are beneath the noise. You begin to recognize your own voice. You begin to reclaim the parts of you once disowned. And slowly, you start living from the inside out instead of the outside in. You stop asking, what do they want from me? And start asking, what do I need to feel whole? You stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be aligned. You stop chasing validation and start choosing peace. Carl Jung taught that the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, hold the key to wholeness, and often our sensitivity, our eccentricity, our emotional depth, these are the very traits we hide, fearing they make us unlovable. But they are not shameful. They are sacred. And when you begin to honor them, you begin to heal. You begin to attract people who see you, not because you've made yourself easy to understand, but because they've done the work to meet you where you are. These are not surface-level connections. They are soul-level recognitions. And they come not when you're perfect, but when you're honest, when you stop performing, when you stop pretending, when you allow your difference to lead instead of apologizing for it. If you've made it this far, it means you didn't give up on yourself, even when others gave up on understanding you. That alone is strength. Quiet, enduring, often invisible, but it's the kind of strength that carries souls across lifetimes. Carl Jung believed that the journey toward wholeness demands the courage to walk alone for a time. Not because we are meant to be alone forever, but because we must first reclaim the parts of ourselves we once abandoned just to belong. Ask yourself, how many pieces of your truth did you trade for peace? How many times did you smile to hide discomfort, agree to avoid conflict, shrink to fit a room that was never built for someone like you? And the answer isn't meant to shame you, it's meant to liberate you. Because what you gave away to survive, you can reclaim to live. The world has always misunderstood people who live from the soul. Artists, mystics, revolutionaries, poets, healers, those who feel too much, see too clearly, question too often. They've been burned, mocked, dismissed, exiled, not because they were wrong, but because they threatened the illusion of certainty. You threaten that illusion too. When you speak your truth, even in tremors, it unsettles those who are still living inside their masks. When you choose depth over distraction, people call you intense. But what they really mean is uncomfortable. When you stop performing, stop pleasing, stop playing the role, they don't know what to do with you. But that is not your burden. It is your boundary. You are not here to be easy to digest. You are here to be whole. And wholeness means including your contradictions, your wildness and your gentleness, your grief and your joy, your questions and your stillness. You don't have to choose between being real and being loved, but you must risk being misunderstood. You must accept that being different means you won't be for everyone. And that's the point. Your energy is medicine for some and a mirror for others. And not everyone is ready to look into that mirror. Carl Jung spoke often about the process of individuation, becoming who you are, distinct from the collective persona. This process requires separating from the roles you were assigned, from the labels you inherited, from the narrative that says, this is who you should be to be acceptable. But your soul didn't come here to be acceptable. It came to be expressed. And when you live that expression fully, you become an invitation, not to conformity, but to liberation. Others may not understand your path, but some will feel its truth, not through your explanations, but through your presence. They will recognize themselves in you, the self they buried, the voice they silenced, the fire they dimmed. And your example will call them home to themselves. That's how change begins, not through arguments or dominance or conversion, but through embodiment. When you embody your truth, you don't have to convince anyone. You simply become a lighthouse, and those meant to find you will. But you must keep shining, even when the waves are high and the night is long. even when your light is met with silence, even when you feel like the only one. Because you're not. You're part of a quiet revolution, a scattered constellation of souls who were never meant to fit in, but to illuminate. And sometimes that means walking through life with more questions than answers, more solitude than applause, more discomfort than ease. But it also means living with more honesty than most will ever taste, more depth, more clarity, more alignment. It means waking up and looking in the mirror without flinching. It means speaking even when your voice shakes, because silence would be a betrayal. It means choosing truth over belonging again and again until you realize truth is the deepest form of belonging there is. You may never be understood by the masses, but you will be understood by those who matter. Not because you bent to be like them, but because you had the courage to be yourself. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." You've been dreaming long enough. Now is the time to wake. Not into a fantasy, but into the sacred mess of your real life. With your pain and your wisdom, your confusion and your clarity, your yearning and your peace. You don't have to earn the right to be different. You were born that way for a reason. So stop apologizing for what makes you unique. Stop hiding your insights, your sensitivity, your knowing. Stop pretending you're like everyone else just to avoid rejection. Because every time you do, you reject yourself. And that's a cost your soul can no longer afford. You are not here to be normal. You are here to be whole, to walk your path, even when it winds through fog and fire, to speak your truth, even when your voice is the only one echoing in the dark, to hold space for your difference, not as a burden, but as a gift. Because in the end, it is your difference that will open doors you never imagined. It is your difference that will break generational cycles. It is your difference that will guide others home. So if you feel like no one understands you, maybe it's because you were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be remembered. And the people who are meant to remember you, they're listening, even now, even in silence. And if you ever begin to question your worth because someone else failed to see it, come back to this. You are not meant for everyone. You are meant for those who are ready. Ready to meet you where you are. Ready to walk with you in depth, not just surface. Ready to love, not the version of you that makes them comfortable, but the real one. And yes, that road is quieter, but it's also more honest, more whole, more alive. Keep walking. Keep listening inward. Keep living the questions that others fear to ask. Because one day, the ones who were searching will hear your voice and feel less alone. And that is your gift. Your difference is not a wound. It is your superpower. You don't need to explain it. You just need to embody it fully, boldly, unapologetically.